The autumn air in Manhattan carried the familiar symphony of honking taxis, distant sirens, and the rhythmic clicking of heels against concrete. Margot Robbie pulled her wool coat tighter as she walked alongside Leonardo DiCaprio down Fifth Avenue, their conversation flowing naturally between upcoming projects and shared concerns about environmental initiatives. The documentary screening went better than expected, Leo said, adjusting his baseball cap lower over his eyes. Despite his attempts at anonymity, a few passers-by had already recognized them, though most New Yorkers maintained their characteristic indifference to celebrity sightings. Margot nodded, her Australian accent softening her words. The footage from the Amazon was heartbreaking, but necessary. People need to see what's really happening. They paused at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the towering buildings, and the sidewalks buzzed with the usual mix of tourists, locals, and street performers. Neither actor noticed the group of young men approaching from behind until it was too late to avoid them. "Hey, Barbie," one of them called out, his voice carrying an edge that made both actors tense. "How about a smile for your fans?" Margot's steps faltered slightly, but she kept walking, her expression carefully neutral. Leo moved closer to her side, his protective instincts immediately activated. "Come on, don't be stuck up," another voice joined in, this one more aggressive. "We just want to talk to the pretty lady." The group had closed the distance now, effectively surrounding them on the busy sidewalk. What had started as unwanted attention was quickly escalating into something more sinister. Other pedestrians seemed to sense the tension and gave them a wider berth, but no one stopped to help. "We're just trying to get somewhere," Leo said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations. "Please give us some space." "Oh, look, her boyfriend's getting tough," the apparent leader of the group sneered. He was probably in his early 20s, wearing a stained hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. His companions laughed, emboldened by his bravado. One of them stepped directly into Margot's path, forcing her to stop. "You know, you're even prettier in person. But you'd look better with less clothes on." The comment sent a chill down Margot's spine, but she maintained her composure. Years in Hollywood had unfortunately prepared her for this type of harassment, though it never became easier to endure. "That's enough," Leo's voice cut through the air like ice. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need police assistance on Fifth Avenue between 42nd and 43rd Street. We have a group of men harassing pedestrians and making threatening comments." The leader of the group seemed momentarily thrown by Leo's decisive action. "Hey, we're just having fun, man. No need to involve the cops." "Fun?" Leo's eyes blazed with anger. "Intimidating women on the street is your idea of fun?" Within minutes, the distinctive wail of sirens could be heard approaching. The group of harassers began to look nervous, shuffling their feet and glancing around for escape routes. But Leo's calm presence and the gathering crowd of onlookers made it clear they weren't going anywhere. 2 NYPD officers arrived on scene, their professional demeanor immediately taking control of the situation. Officer Martinez, a veteran with 15 years on the force, approached Leo and Margot while her partner began questioning the group of men. "Can you tell me what happened here?" Officer Martinez asked, pulling out her notepad. Leo provided a clear, detailed account of the harassment, while Margot added her perspective on the increasingly threatening nature of the comments. Several witnesses who had stopped to watch also offered their statements, corroborating the story. "We see this more often than we'd like," Officer Martinez explained as she took down their information. "Street harassment has been on the rise, especially targeting women who appear to be alone or vulnerable." The leader of the harassment group was arrested on charges of aggravated harassment and disorderly conduct, while his companions received citations and warnings. As they were led away, one of them shouted back, "You think you're better than us because you're famous?" The irony wasn't lost on Leo. This wasn't about celebrity status, it was about basic human decency and respect. As the police finished their paperwork and the crowd began to disperse, Margot and Leo found themselves standing on the sidewalk, processing what had just happened. The adrenaline was slowly wearing off, replaced by a mixture of relief and lingering unease. "Thank you," Margot said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of genuine gratitude. "I've dealt with situations like this before, but having someone actually step in and do something, it means more than you know." Leo shook his head dismissively. "Anyone should have done the same thing. That's the problem, too many people just walk by and pretend they don't see it happening." They decided to continue their walk, though both were more aware of their surroundings now. As they moved through the city streets, Margot shared stories of other incidents she had experienced, comments shouted from car windows, unwanted touching in crowded spaces, the constant vigilance required just to exist as a woman in public. "The worst part isn't even the individual incidents," she explained as they paused at another crosswalk. "It's the way it changes how you move through the world. You're always calculating which route is safer, what time of day to travel, whether you can wear headphones or if you need to stay alert for potential threats." Leo listened intently, realizing how much of this reality had been invisible to him despite his years in the public eye. His own experiences with unwanted attention had been fundamentally different, annoying perhaps, but rarely threatening in the same visceral way. They stopped at a small cafe near Central Park, seeking the comfort of warm drinks and a quiet space to decompress. The barista, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, recognized them but maintained professional discretion, simply taking their order with a friendly smile. "You know what bothers me most?" Leo said as they settled into a corner table. "Those guys probably think what they did was harmless. They'll go home and tell their friends about meeting celebrities without any understanding of how their behavior affected you." Margot nodded, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup for warmth. "That's exactly the problem. There's no accountability, no consequences, no reason for them to examine their actions. They'll probably do the same thing to other women tomorrow." Over the following weeks, the incident stayed with Leo in a way that surprised him. He found himself researching street harassment statistics, learning about the daily reality that millions of women faced simply for existing in public spaces. The numbers were staggering. Studies showed that over 80% of women had experienced some form of street harassment by age 17. Through his environmental foundation, Leo had always focused on climate change and conservation efforts. But this experience opened his eyes to another crisis that deserved attention and resources. He began reaching out to organizations that worked with harassment victims, learning about the legal challenges they faced and the support systems that were desperately underfunded. 3 months later, Leo announced the launch of a new initiative through his foundation, the Safe Streets Legal Defense Fund. The program would provide free legal representation to victims of street harassment, assault, and related crimes, particularly focusing on cases where victims couldn't afford proper legal counsel. "Everyone deserves to feel safe in public spaces," Leo said during the press conference announcing the fund. "What happened to my friend and me was just one incident, but it opened my eyes to a much larger problem that affects millions of people every day." The fund's first client was Maria Santos, a college student who had been repeatedly harassed and followed by the same group of men near her campus. Despite reporting the incidents to police multiple times, the harassment continued, and Maria couldn't afford the legal fees to pursue a restraining order or civil action. Maria's story was painfully familiar to many of the fund's initial applicants. She was a sophomore studying engineering at a state university, working part-time at a campus bookstore to help pay for her education. The harassment had started during her freshman year, catcalls when she walked to class, unwanted comments about her appearance, and eventually escalated to men following her home from work. "I tried ignoring it at first," Maria explained during her initial consultation with the fund's intake coordinator. "Everyone told me that if I didn't react, they'd get bored and move on. But it just got worse." The harassment had begun affecting every aspect of Maria's life. Her grades started slipping as she skipped classes to avoid certain routes on campus. She quit her job at the bookstore because the walk home after evening shifts had become too frightening. She even considered transferring to a different school, despite the financial hardship it would cause her family. The police kept telling me there wasn't much they could do unless someone actually hurt me, Maria continued, her voice trembling slightly. I felt like I had to wait to become a victim of something worse before anyone would take it seriously. Through Leo's program, Maria was connected with Sarah Chen, an experienced civil rights attorney who specialized in harassment cases. Sarah took Maria's case pro bono through the fund and was able to secure not only restraining orders against the harassers but also a settlement that covered Maria's therapy costs and lost wages from the part-time job she'd quit due to fear. I never thought anyone would take my situation seriously, Maria said during an interview with a local news station. Having proper legal support made all the difference. It gave me my life back. The fund quickly grew beyond Leo's initial expectations. Within 6 months, they had helped over 50 victims across multiple states, partnering with law firms and legal aid organizations to expand their reach. The success stories began to multiply: women who could finally walk to work without fear, students who could attend classes without harassment, elderly individuals who could use public transportation safely. Margot, meanwhile, had become an advocate in her own right. She used her platform to speak about the incident and the broader issue of street harassment, appearing on talk shows and writing op-eds about the need for cultural change. It's not enough to just address individual cases, she said during an appearance on a popular late-night show. We need to change the culture that makes this behavior acceptable in the first place. We need to teach people, especially young people, about respect and consent. She partnered with several schools to develop educational programs about harassment prevention and bystander intervention. The programs taught students not just about respecting others, but about how to safely intervene when they witnessed harassment happening to others. The educational initiatives proved to be unexpectedly impactful. During one high school presentation in Los Angeles, a 17-year-old student named David approached Margot afterward with tears in his eyes. I never realized, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought the stuff my friends and I said to girls was just joking around. I didn't understand how it made them feel. David's reaction was becoming increasingly common as the educational programs reached more schools. Students were learning to recognize the difference between harmless interaction and harassment, understanding the impact of their words and actions on others' sense of safety and dignity. The programs also addressed the crucial role of bystanders. Through role-playing exercises and real-world scenarios, students learned how to safely intervene when they witnessed harassment, from direct intervention when it was safe to do so, to calling for help or documenting incidents when direct action might escalate the situation dangerously. We're not asking anyone to become a vigilante, Margot would explain during these sessions. We're asking people to recognize that silence in the face of harassment is a choice, and that choice has consequences for the victim. Teachers and administrators began reporting changes in school culture within months of implementing the programs. Incidents of harassment in hallways and cafeterias decreased significantly, and students were more likely to report problems when they did occur. 1 year after the incident, Leo and Margot met for coffee at a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from the chaos of Manhattan. The cafe was quiet, filled with the gentle hum of conversation and the aroma of freshly roasted beans. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't called the police that day? Margot asked, stirring honey into her tea. Leo considered the question carefully. I think about it often, actually. How many times does this happen when there are no witnesses? When the victim doesn't have the resources or support to fight back? That's what makes the fund so important, Margot replied. We can't stop every incident, but we can make sure people have options when it does happen. The Safe Streets Legal Defense Fund had grown into a national organization by then, with offices in 12 major cities and a network of over 200 volunteer attorneys. They had handled more than 500 cases, with a success rate that exceeded even Leo's optimistic projections. But perhaps more importantly, the fund had helped change the conversation around street harassment. Police departments began taking reports more seriously, knowing that victims now had access to legal support. Prosecutors were more willing to pursue charges, and judges were handing down stiffer sentences. The ripple effects extended beyond the legal system. Companies began implementing better safety measures for employees, universities improved their harassment reporting systems, and community organizations started hosting self-defense and awareness classes. 2 years later, the leader of the group that had harassed Margot and Leo was arrested again, this time for assault. But unlike his previous encounters with the law, this arrest led to serious consequences. The victim in this case, Jennifer Walsh, had immediate access to legal representation through the Safe Streets Fund, and her attorney was able to ensure that the perpetrator's history of harassment was considered during sentencing. He received 18 months in prison and was required to complete anger management and respect education programs as part of his parole. More importantly, Jennifer received a substantial settlement that helped her relocate and start fresh in a new city where she felt safe. Justice doesn't always look the way we expect, Sarah Chen reflected during a staff meeting at the fund's headquarters. Sometimes it's about getting someone the therapy they need to heal. Sometimes it's about forcing a repeat offender to face real consequences. And sometimes it's about changing laws so the next victim has better options. The fund had indeed been instrumental in pushing for legislative changes. Working with lawmakers in several states, they had helped strengthen harassment laws, extend statute of limitations for certain crimes, and improve victim support services. Leo often thought about the randomness of that day in Manhattan. If they had taken a different route, if they had left the documentary screening 10 minutes earlier or later, if they had been too busy or distracted to notice what was happening, how different things might have been. But he had learned that meaningful change rarely comes from planned moments. It emerges from how people choose to respond when faced with injustice, whether they have the courage to act when action is needed, and whether they can see beyond their own immediate experience to understand larger patterns of harm. The Safe Streets Legal Defense Fund continued to grow, but its founders never lost sight of its origins in a single moment of harassment on a busy New York street. Every case they handled, every victim they helped, every perpetrator held accountable, it all traced back to the decision to not let that moment pass without consequence. "We can't change what happened that day," Margot said during the fund's 3rd anniversary celebration. "But we can make sure it leads to something better. We can make sure that when people face these situations, they're not facing them alone." The fund's impact was measured not just in legal victories, but in the countless incidents that never happened because potential perpetrators knew there would be consequences, in the victims who found their voices because they knew someone would listen, and in the slow but steady shift toward a culture where everyone understood that public spaces belonged to everyone equally. That autumn day in Manhattan had lasted only a few minutes, but its consequences would ripple outward for years to come, touching lives in ways that Leo and Margot were still discovering. Sometimes the most important moments are the ones we never plan for, the tests of character that arise without warning and demand immediate action. In those moments, we discover not just who we are, but who we choose to become. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoy this video and learned a lesson. I would be grateful for your likes. Also don't forget to subscribe and comment on the video. See you soon.